The prince called security after palace cameras revealed the truth about the Duchess. The palace had rules. Rules about posture. Rules about speech. Rules about where you stood when you spoke and how loudly you were allowed to exist. But the one rule no one ever said out loud was the most powerful of all. Status decides truth. If someone important said something happened, it happened. If someone unimportant said something happened, it needed proof. And tonight, proof was about to change everything. Lila had worked in the royal household for 3 years. Officially, her title was Junior Domestic Assistant. Unofficially, she was invisible. She handled tea trays, polished silver, restocked hallway flower arrangements, and memorized schedules she was never meant to understand. She spoke only when spoken to. She moved quickly, quietly, carefully, because palace mistakes didn't get you fired. They got you erased. Tonight was different. The palace was hosting a small private gathering, senior family members only. No press. No public staff movement unless summoned. Security presence was doubled. Lila had been assigned to hallway rotation outside the children's private wing, mostly to refill water pitchers and remove empty glassware.
As illustrated, our security awareness program integrates key protocols to safeguard our operation. This framework ensures vigilance across all levels.
Not crying. Just sharp tension. The kind adults create when they think no one important is watching. The hallway door wasn't fully closed. Through the small gap, Lila saw movement. The Duchess stood near the sitting area, her posture rigid, controlled. The young princess stood in front of her, stiff, confused, clearly overwhelmed. The Duchess reached forward suddenly, grabbing the girl's shoulders and shaking her once, sharply. Not long. Not repeated. But forceful enough to make the child stumble backward into the sofa. Lila froze. Her brain split into two voices instantly. Voice 1, you saw nothing. Walk away. Voice 2, that wasn't right. Then the Duchess spoke, low, tense, controlled anger. You will not embarrass this family again. The princess didn't cry. That somehow made it worse. She just nodded, too fast, too scared, like someone trying to fix something they didn't understand. Lila stepped back quietly, heart pounding so loud she was sure someone would hear it through the marble walls. Her hands were shaking. Because palace power wasn't loud. It was calm, controlled, smiling, and dangerous. Downstairs, the gathering continued. Laughter, crystal glasses, gentle piano music. Like two completely different worlds existed inside one building. Lila stood in the service corridor trying to breathe normally. Because reporting something like this didn't just require courage. It required protection. And she didn't have any. Except maybe the prince. He had a reputation among staff. Not warm. Not cold. But precise. He noticed details others ignored. And he hated inefficiency. Including inefficiency in truth. Lila didn't go to him immediately. She spent 40 minutes pretending to organize service trays while replaying the moment in her head. Was it worse than she thought? Was it less? Did she misunderstand? Or was she about to risk her entire career over something she couldn't unsee? Then security radios crackled. Prince approaching East Corridor. Her chest tightened. Now or never. When he turned the corner, he looked exactly like palace portraits always showed him. Composed, alert, impossible to read. Lila stepped forward before her courage could evaporate. Your Highness, may I speak? He stopped. Studied her face. Not annoyed. Not impatient. Just evaluating. Yes. One word. Permission and pressure at the same time. I may have witnessed something in the children's wing, she said carefully. Not accusation. Not conclusion. Just fact. His expression didn't change. What did you see? Not what happened. Not who did what. Just, what did you see? That mattered. She explained. Carefully. Precisely. No emotion added. No assumptions. Just movement. Words. Timing. When she finished, silence sat between them. Then he asked one question. Did anyone else see this? No, Your Highness. Another pause. Then he said something she would remember for the rest of her life. Then we verify. Not defend. Not dismiss. Not escalate. Verify. He turned towards security communications. Pull corridor and sitting room cameras. Last hour. Private review. Lila felt her knees go weak with relief and terror at the same time. Because now truth wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to evidence. The security room was colder than expected. 3 screens. 2 officers. 1 technician. Footage loaded silently. Timestamps moved backward. Then forward again. Then slowed. There it was. The sitting room. The Duchess. The princess. The moment. Clear. Unmistakable. But not exactly what Lila thought she saw. The Duchess did grab her shoulders. Yes. But the camera angle revealed something Lila hadn't seen from the doorway. The princess had been pulling away from the room, panicked, frantic, heading toward a glass display cabinet. Inside the cabinet, historic crystal, antique ceremonial blade, fragile heirlooms worth more than most people made in a lifetime, and dangerous if shattered. The Duchess grabbed her fast, shook once, sure, controlled, then pulled her backward, away from the cabinet, not toward violence, away from danger. Then the audio synced, and the words sounded different now. You will not run when you panic. You could have hurt yourself. Not image protection. Not anger. Fear. The kind adults hide when they're responsible for someone else's safety. The prince leaned forward slightly, watching again. Not rushing. Not defending. Not accusing. Just absorbing. Then he did something unexpected. He asked for the earlier footage. 10 minutes earlier. Then 20. Then 30. And that's when the real story started to appear. The princess had been overwhelmed during the gathering. Too many adults. Too many expectations. Too many eyes. She slipped upstairs early, alone. The Duchess followed. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like someone who noticed something no one else did. Lila felt heat crawl up her neck. Because she realized something painful. Sometimes you don't missee events. You missee intent. The prince finally leaned back. Thank you for reporting what you believed you saw, he said to Lila. Not praise. Not criticism. Respect. For honesty. For courage. For choosing truth over silence. But then he added, however, this is not the full situation. And the room shifted again. Because the story wasn't about a mistake. It was about something much bigger. Something the cameras hadn't caught yet. Something that explained why the Duchess looked so tense. Why security had been doubled. Why tonight's guest list had been so controlled. And why the prince quietly, calmly, still ordered a full security audit of the palace wing. Not because of what happened in the room. Because of what happened before anyone entered it. Outside, the palace lights glowed warm and perfect against the night. Inside, truth was still unfolding. And by morning, someone's reputation would change forever. But not in the way anyone expected. The threat no one saw coming. By midnight, the palace felt different. Not louder. Not more chaotic. Just tighter. Like the air itself knew something important had shifted. Security teams moved in pairs now. Hallway cameras were being checked in real time. And conversations stopped the moment certain people entered a room. Lila noticed everything. Because when you live invisible, you become an expert observer. She stayed in the service corridor longer than her shift required. Not because she was told to. Because something in her gut told her tonight wasn't finished. Inside the private security room, the prince stood with the head of palace protection and two senior analysts. No raised voices. No panic. Just controlled urgency. The dangerous kind. Run full corridor heat scans for the last 6 hours, he said. Already started, sir. Focus on service access points. Anyone who entered without standard escort clearance. Yes, sir. Lila didn't understand everything she heard. But she understood tone. And this was not about family conflict. This was about risk. Real risk. 40 minutes later, one of the analysts spoke quietly. Sir, we have something. The screen changed. Service staircase. Back entrance. Timestamp, 7:42 p.m. A catering assistant walked through. Uniform correct. Badge correct. Posture wrong. Too stiff. Too aware of cameras. Zoom, the prince said. The badge number appeared. Valid. But issued 2 days ago. Temporary clearance. Who authorized it? He asked. The analyst swallowed. Signed under Duchess household authority, but the digital signature log is corrupted. The room went silent. Because corrupted palace authorization logs were not accidents. They were alarms. Lila felt cold spread through her arms. Because she suddenly understood something terrifying. If someone had used the Duchess's authority without her knowledge, then tonight's tension upstairs wasn't anger. It was instinct. Track movement after entry, the prince said. Footage rolled forward. The catering assistant moved through staff corridors. Avoiding main service routes. Avoiding heavy camera clusters. Like someone who studied the layout. Then the screen froze. Outside the children's wing. Exactly 30 minutes before the sitting room incident. The assistant didn't enter. Didn't knock. Just stood there. Waiting. The prince's jaw tightened slightly. Continue. Footage rolled again. 5 minutes later. The princess exited the family gathering area alone. Walking fast. Looking overwhelmed. Heading upstairs. Toward the same hallway. Toward the same sitting room. Toward the same cabinet filled with fragile glass and ceremonial steel. The assistant moved. Not toward her. Toward the side emergency exit. Like the original plan had just changed. The room understood instantly. Someone had been waiting for the child to be alone. Lila pressed her hand over her mouth. Because now she understood why the Duchess grabbed her so fast. Why fear had been hiding under that controlled voice. Why security had doubled. Why the prince wasn't angry. He was calculating. Lock down all temporary clearance badges, he ordered. Already started. Find the real identity behind that uniform. Yes, sir. Then he turned slightly toward the technician. Pull external camera feeds. City access. Parking perimeter. Another 10 minutes passed. Then, sir, vehicle match. Black delivery van. Plates cloned. Entered service route at 7:18 p.m. Left at 8:02 p.m. Right after the Duchess escorted the princess back into the family wing. The timeline clicked together like falling glass. Someone entered. Someone waited. Something changed when the child didn't stay alone long enough. And someone left fast. Lila's knees felt weak again. Because palace stories weren't fairy tales. They were power. And power attracted people who wanted to break it. The prince finally spoke again. Notify internal investigation. Quiet classification. Understood. And inform the Duchess I need to speak with her privately. Not accusation. Not defense. Coordination. 20 minutes later, the Duchess entered the security room. Still composed. Still perfectly dressed. But now Lila saw something she hadn't noticed before. Exhaustion. And something else. Relief. You saw it? The Duchess asked quietly. Yes, the prince replied. No titles. No performance. Just two people carrying the same responsibility. I suspected when the guest list leak happened last week, she said. I didn't want to escalate without proof. You had instinct, he said. And I may have been wrong, she replied. No, he said calmly. You reacted to protect. The room felt different now. Less like hierarchy. More like alliance. Lila realized something important. Power didn't always mean control. Sometimes it meant being the first person blamed if anything went wrong. The Duchess finally looked at the screen again. At the moment she grabbed the princess. At the moment everyone would have judged if they only saw half the story. I will accept any review necessary, she said. The prince shook his head once. We review systems. Not protection. Then he turned to security. Expand review to past 30 days. Pattern search. Because this wasn't random anymore. This was planned. And somewhere outside the palace walls, someone thought they had almost succeeded. But they didn't know something yet. They didn't know the person they tried to frame was about to become the key to exposing everything. Lila stood in the corridor later that night, long after her shift ended, watching palace lights glow against the dark sky, realizing something she would never forget. Truth isn't loud, but when it arrives, it changes who gets protected and who gets exposed. And by morning, the story wouldn't be about a Duchess losing control. It would be about someone else losing everything. The truth the world couldn't ignore. Morning didn't arrive gently. It arrived like pressure. Invisible. Heavy. Inevitable. By 6 a.m., the palace communications office was already active. Not because the public knew anything yet. Because when security shifts overnight, information eventually leaks. And today, the wrong version of the story was already starting to spread. Lila noticed it first on a staff member's phone during breakfast rotation. A headline. Vague. Dangerous. Half-true. Senior royal under internal review after incident with young family member. No names. But the implication was obvious. An implication was enough to destroy reputations before facts ever spoke. Across the palace, senior advisors moved quickly. Not to hide truth. To control timing. Because releasing incomplete information was sometimes worse than silence. Inside the private strategy room, the prince stood beside the Duchess. Not in front. Not above. Beside. A signal. One Lila didn't fully understand, but felt mattered. The press is fishing, the communications director said. They've heard security escalated overnight. Of course they have, the prince replied calmly. What's our exposure window? 3 to 4 hours before speculation becomes narrative. The Duchess folded her hands quietly. Then we give them the full story, she said. Not defensive. Not angry. Certain. The room paused. Because full truth releases were rare. They removed control. But they protected credibility. The prince nodded once. Prepare controlled release with evidence timeline. Meanwhile, security investigation continued. And by mid-morning, they had something bigger. Much bigger. The fake catering assistant wasn't random. The face recognition team finally produced a match. Not criminal database. Corporate database. Private contracting firm. One that had recently lost a multi-million government partnership tied to royal charitable oversight. Motive shifted instantly. This wasn't chaos. This was retaliation. And possibly, public sabotage. Because if someone could create a scandal involving a child and a senior royal figure, public trust damage would spread globally within hours. But there was something else. Something colder. The fake staff badge authorization wasn't just forged. It was inserted using partial internal system credentials. Someone inside had helped. Maybe knowingly. Maybe manipulated. But inside. By noon, internal interviews started quietly. No arrests. No accusations. Just facts. Movement logs. Access patterns. Behavior tracking. And by 1:40 p.m., they found the weakest link.
It's
A
activating.
mid-level scheduling assistant. Not malicious.
Incredible.
Not political. Just desperate. The assistant had received an anonymous email weeks earlier, claiming to be from senior logistics support, requesting temporary clearance approval to expedite visiting event vendor documentation. Standard language. Standard formatting. Standard urgency. Except one thing. The return contact number didn't exist. She thought she was helping. Improving efficiency. Following orders. And now she sat shaking in an interview room, realizing small mistakes can carry global consequences. But the prince didn't order punishment first. He ordered protection review. Because exploitation always starts with finding the most pressured person in the system. By late afternoon, communications was ready. Full timeline. Video segments. Security explanation. External threat confirmation without operational details. And most important, the sitting room footage. Full context. Before. During. After. At 5 p.m. the official statement released. Within 12 minutes, global news picked it up. Within 30 minutes, public sentiment flipped. Within 2 hours, the story wasn't scandal. It was survival. People didn't see a duchess losing control. They saw a guardian reacting in a moment of risk. They saw a system detecting infiltration. They saw leadership choosing transparency instead of image protection. And then something unexpected happened. Public conversation shifted beyond the palace. Toward something bigger. People started talking about workplace system exploitation. About how attackers don't always break doors. They trick people into opening them. The mid-level assistant, the one who approved the badge, wasn't publicly named. Instead, the palace released new internal training funding across all departments.
Markets are reacting fast
Protection
to the
without
announcement.
humiliation.
Get confirmation from the
Accountability
source.
without destruction. That decision changed public perception more than any statement could. Because it showed something rare. Power choosing repair instead of sacrifice. Meanwhile, authorities outside palace jurisdiction were already moving. Because clone plates, corporate sabotage, credential fraud, attempted security breach involving a protected minor. Those weren't PR issues. Those were crimes. By evening, 2 arrests were made connected to the contracting firm. No dramatic press conference. No celebration. Just quiet confirmation. Lila watched coverage from the staff break room. Heart still racing. Because 24 hours ago, she thought she witnessed something terrible. Now she realized she witnessed something else. The moment truth almost lost. And then didn't. Later that night, the Duchess passed her in the corridor. Paused. Just for a second. Thank you for speaking when you were unsure, she said quietly. Lila swallowed. I thought I was reporting harm. You were, the Duchess said gently. Just not the kind you thought. And that stayed with Lila long after the palace lights dimmed. Because justice wasn't always punishment. Sometimes it was correction. Sometimes it was exposure. And sometimes, it was stopping something terrible before it ever had the chance to happen. But one thing was now certain. The people who tried to create scandal had just created evidence. And part 4 wouldn't be about survival. It would be about consequences. And something even rarer than power. Trust earned. The legacy of truth. The arrests were not announced with flashing lights or dramatic speeches. They were confirmed in one sentence. Carefully worded. Legally precise. Emotionally quiet. But the world heard it anyway. By morning, news cycles had shifted from speculation to accountability. Investigators confirmed coordinated corporate retaliation, digital credential manipulation, security infiltration attempt, and most importantly, intent to create a public scandal involving a protected child. Inside the palace, life didn't stop. It never did. That was the strange thing about places built on history. Crisis didn't pause them. It just folded into the walls. Lila returned to her normal shift schedule. Silver trays, hallway flowers, water pitchers. Except now something was different. Not her job. Her presence. People greeted her more directly. Security officers nodded when she passed. Supervisors spoke to her like someone who had proven judgment, not just obedience. Because speaking up when you're unsure is harder than speaking up when you're certain. And everyone in the palace knew it. Across leadership offices, another kind of work was happening. Not crisis response. System rebuilding. Temporary badge approvals were redesigned. Two-person verification added. Behavioral anomaly alerts expanded. Staff training upgraded from procedural to psychological awareness. The prince personally signed off on one addition. Anonymous internal reporting protection expansion. Not because of one event. Because of what that event revealed. Fear keeps systems silent. Trust keeps them safe. Meanwhile, outside palace walls, legal consequences accelerated. The contracting firm executives faced charges tied to fraud, conspiracy, and attempted institutional sabotage. Not fast justice, but certain justice. The mid-level assistant who unknowingly approved the fake clearance? She wasn't fired. She was reassigned temporarily to training review development. Because she understood exactly how manipulation worked now. An experience like that protects systems better than theory ever could. Public reaction continued evolving, not obsession. Respect. Commentary shifted from gossip to something deeper. How many crises in the world start with someone afraid to question authority? How many systems fail because people think small decisions don't matter? And then something no one expected happened. The Duchess became the public face of a new initiative. Institutional protection through psychological awareness training. Not charity. Not image repair. Prevention. During the first public address weeks later, she said something simple. Protection is not about reacting perfectly. It is about choosing responsibility even when you are unsure. That sentence spread faster than any scandal headline ever could. Because people recognized themselves in it. For Lila, life stayed mostly the same. Except one afternoon she was called to a small administrative office. Not disciplinary. Not evaluation. Opportunity. She was offered training advancement. Security liaison certification pathway. Optional. No pressure. Just recognition. She stared at the paperwork for a long time. Because 3 years ago she thought her job was to stay invisible. Now she understood something else. Invisible people see first. And sometimes, they are the difference between prevention and regret. Months later, palace life returned to its steady rhythm. Ceremonies, charity work, quiet routines. But one small change remained permanent. Every staff training program now included one opening sentence. If something feels wrong, even if you are not sure why, speak. Because history rarely remembers the moment danger almost succeeded. But systems remember. And they learn. One evening, long after media attention moved on, the prince stood overlooking the palace gardens. The Duchess joined him. Silence sat comfortably between them.
As illustrated,
Not
our
heavy,
security awareness
just
program
honest.
integrates key protocols
We
to
were
safeguard
lucky,
our operations.
she
This
said
framework ensures
quietly.
vigilance across
No,
all levels.
he replied. We were prepared. And that was the real story. Not scandal avoided. Not reputation saved. Preparation working exactly the way it was meant to. Across the palace grounds, lights glowed warm against the evening sky. Inside, thousands of small decisions continued. Invisible. Important. Protective. Because justice is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a system improved, a mistake corrected, a voice taken seriously, a child protected without ever knowing why. And somewhere in the staff corridors, Lila walked past polished marble and historic portraits, carrying a tray like she always had. But now she carried something else too. Certainty. That doing the right thing quietly still changes history. Final message. Respect is not given by status. Trust is not protected by silence. And justice does not begin in courtrooms. It begins the moment someone decides. I will speak even if I might be wrong. The ripple no one could stop. 6 months later, the palace looked exactly the same. That was the strange thing about history. From the outside, it never looked like it changed. But inside, everything was different. Security didn't feel heavier anymore. It felt smarter, quieter, more aware. Less about watching people, more about understanding them. The new training programs had already spread beyond palace walls. Government departments requested copies. International institutions asked for consultation. Even private corporations quietly reached out, asking how to build systems that didn't just rely on hierarchy but on awareness. Because the lesson was simple, but powerful. Bad actors don't always break systems. They trick good people into helping them. Lila now worked 2 roles. Half domestic operations, half security liaison trainee. The first time she wore the new badge, she stared at it for a long time. Not because it meant power, because it meant responsibility. She remembered the night everything changed. The moment in the hallway. The moment of doubt. The moment she almost stayed silent. And that memory made her better at her new role than any textbook ever could. Because she knew how fear sounded, how hesitation looked, how manipulation felt when it disguised itself as authority. Meanwhile, outside the palace, consequences continued unfolding. The corporate network behind the sabotage attempt didn't collapse overnight. But contracts disappeared. Partnerships dissolved. Trust, once broken publicly, rarely comes back. The executives involved weren't remembered as masterminds. They were remembered as people who underestimated something simple. Systems built on trust are harder to break than systems built on fear. The mid-level assistant who had approved the fake clearance? She became one of the most requested internal trainers. Not because she was perfect, because she was honest. She opened every training session with the same sentence. I didn't think my small decision mattered. I was wrong. And people listened. Because truth without ego teaches faster than authority ever can. The Duchess continued leading the institutional protection initiative. But something changed in how people saw her. Less symbol. More human. More protector than figurehead. During one international summit, a young staff member asked her privately, "How do you know when to act, if you're not sure?" She thought for a moment before answering. "You don't wait for certainty," she said. "You act when responsibility becomes louder than doubt." That quote spread quietly through leadership circles. Not viral, but permanent. The prince focused heavily on long-term structural reforms. Not public ones. Real ones. The kind that don't make headlines, but prevent future disasters no one will ever know were avoided. Because the greatest success of protection systems is invisible success. Nothing happens. And that's the goal. One evening, nearly a year after the incident, the palace hosted a small internal appreciation gathering. No press. No speeches. Just recognition. Lila almost didn't attend. She still felt strange being invited to rooms where decisions used to happen far above her level. But when she arrived, she realized something. The room wasn't about rank. It was about contribution. The Duchess approached her quietly. "You changed more than you realize," she said. Lila shook her head immediately. "I just spoke." The Duchess smiled slightly. "Yes," she said. "And most people don't." Across the room, security leaders, operations managers, advisors, and staff shared conversations without hierarchy barriers. Because crisis had done something unexpected. It made everyone understand how connected small actions really were. Later that night, walking through the corridor where everything first began, Lila paused outside the same sitting room. The lights were off. The hallway was quiet, peaceful, normal. And that was the real victory. Not exposure. Not punishment. Normal. Safe. Protected. She adjusted her badge and kept walking. Because protection isn't a moment. It's a habit. Built daily. Quietly. By people who may never be famous. But are always necessary. Across the palace, across institutions, across systems that would never even know her name. The ripple continued. Because one decision to speak created. Better systems. Stronger protections. Smarter leadership. And a reminder that status does not equal truth. And somewhere, in some future moment, in some other building, another person would feel unsure. Afraid to speak. Afraid to be wrong. And maybe, because of changes made after this night, their voice would be heard faster. And danger would end sooner. Final legacy message. Justice is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in small choices. Quiet courage. Honest reporting. And systems willing to listen. And sometimes, the people history remembers are not the loudest ones. They are the ones who simply refuse to stay silent.